Officer Johnson, a shining example of dedication, a true protector. She lived for her badge, for her city, her commitment, unwavering, her record, impeccable. She had earned the respect of her peers. They knew her as reliable, honest, a good cop. But behind the badge she was more than just an officer. She was a woman with dreams, aspirations, a woman who believed in the power of justice, a woman who would soon face a darkness she could never have imagined. Her journey began with hope, a desire to make a difference. Little did she know, her path would lead her to a crossroad, a choice between her integrity and her career, a choice that would test her strength in ways she could never have anticipated. Her story is a reminder that even those sworn to protect can become victims, a reminder that the fight for justice is often perilous, demanding courage and resilience. Captain Smith, his uniform, a symbol of authority, but beneath the surface a darkness festered. Power for him was a weapon, a tool to manipulate and control. He preyed on the vulnerable, exploiting their trust. His eyes, once reflecting respect, now held a glint of something sinister. He saw Officer Johnson not as a colleague but as a target. Her dedication, her vulnerability, fueled his perverse desires. He believed himself untouchable, his position, a shield against accountability. He used his power to silence dissent, to bury the truth, his actions, a betrayal of the badge, a stain on the honor of the force. He underestimated Officer Johnson. He mistook her kindness for weakness. He failed to see the steel beneath her compassion. He would learn in the most devastating way the price of his arrogance. Their paths crossed at the precinct, a seemingly ordinary encounter. He, the seasoned captain, she, the bright-eyed rookie. Respect at first defined their interactions, a professional distance maintained, but power dynamics shifted. The captain's true nature began to surface. His gaze lingered too long. His compliments, once professional, took on a disturbing tone. Officer Johnson felt a growing unease. His presence, once reassuring, now cast a shadow. She tried to ignore it, to rationalize his behavior, but the truth, like a dark stain, began to spread. Their history, once unremarkable, became a tangled web, a web of manipulation, fear, and silence. Officer Johnson found herself trapped, her voice stifled by the weight of the captain's authority. The harassment started subtly. A whispered comment, a lingering touch. Officer Johnson dismissed it at first. A misunderstanding, she thought, a figment of her imagination. But the captain's advances grew bolder. His words, once professional, became laced with innuendo. He made inappropriate jokes, his eyes lingering on her body. He found excuses to be alone with her, his presence suffocating, inescapable. Shame and fear washed over her. How could she, a protector of the innocent, be subjected to such vile behavior? Her instincts screamed at her to fight back, to expose him. But a chilling reality set in. Who would believe her? He was the captain, a man of power and influence. She was just an officer, her word against his. The thought of reporting him felt like a losing battle, but the weight of his actions, the constant fear, became unbearable. With a heavy heart, Officer Johnson confided in a trusted colleague, a senior officer she admired. Surely he would understand, would offer support, but her hopes were dashed against the cold wall of silence. "You sure you're not misinterpreting things?" he asked, his voice laced with doubt. The captain, he's a good man, a bit old-fashioned maybe. Her colleague, blinded by the captain's authority, refused to see the truth. Desperation gnawed at her. She gathered her courage and approached the department's internal affairs division. She recounted the harassment, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. But their response was equally disheartening. They treated her with suspicion, questioning her motives. The investigators, it seemed, were more interested in protecting the institution than in seeking justice. Her complaint, she realized with a sinking heart, would be buried, lost in a system designed to protect its own.
Keep quiet, please. Quiet.
The captain's harassment extended beyond words. He began to sabotage her career, using his position to punish her for her defiance. She was given the most undesirable shifts, the most menial tasks. Her once stellar performance reviews were now peppered with criticism, her every move scrutinized. The captain, with a malicious smirk, ensured that she would pay for her refusal to submit to his advances. Her dream of rising through the ranks, of making a real difference, was slipping away. The once proud officer found herself ostracized, isolated from her colleagues. The whispers started, fueled by the captain's lies. She became known as a troublemaker, a liar. Her reputation, once impeccable, was tarnished by the very man who had sworn to uphold the law. The injustice of it all burned like a fire in her belly. She refused to let him break her. As the harassment continued, Captain Smith's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He became paranoid, convinced that Officer Johnson was plotting against him. His eyes, once filled with lust, now held a glint of fear. He started following her, monitoring her every move. He planted rumors, spreading lies about her competence and her character. He was determined to discredit her, to silence her before she could expose his crimes. Officer Johnson, sensing his desperation, knew she had to act quickly. She began to gather evidence, meticulously documenting every instance of harassment. She recorded their conversations, her heart pounding with each illicit overture. She knew the risks. If caught, she could lose everything. But the desire for justice, for revenge, fueled her determination. She would no longer be a victim. She would fight back, even if it meant risking her own career, her own safety. The walls of her apartment seemed to close in, suffocating her. The silence, once a comfort, now echoed with the captain's threats, his venomous words replaying in her mind. The harassment had seeped into every aspect of her life, poisoning her thoughts, her relationships. Sleep offered no escape, her nights haunted by nightmares. The weight of his actions pressed down on her, stealing her joy, her peace of mind. Her once vibrant spirit now flickered like a candle in the wind, threatened with extinction. Friends reached out, their voices filled with concern, but their words seemed distant, unable to penetrate the wall of isolation she had built around herself. How could they possibly understand the turmoil that raged within her? How could they comprehend the fear that clung to her like a second skin? She withdrew from their embrace, her silence a shield, protecting them from the darkness that threatened to consume her. She couldn't bear to see the worry in their eyes, the pity that she swore she didn't need. The betrayal cut deep, a wound that refused to heal. It wasn't just the captain's actions that haunted her, but the deafening silence of those who stood by and did nothing. The colleagues she had considered friends, the superiors she had respected, had all failed her. The thin blue line, once a symbol of solidarity, now felt like a noose tightening around her neck. The very institution she had sworn to serve had become her prison, its walls closing in, suffocating her with its indifference. The weight of their betrayal was a heavy burden to bear. It chipped away at her faith in the system, in the very foundations of justice that she had dedicated her life to upholding. Doubt gnawed at her resolve, whispering insidious suggestions in her ear. Was it all worth it? Was there any point in fighting a battle that seemed unwinnable? The darkness whispered that surrender was the only option, that silence was her only refuge, but deep down a flicker of defiance still burned. The joy she once found in her work now felt like a distant memory. The uniform that had once filled her with pride now felt heavy, a constant reminder of the betrayal she had endured. The streets she had patrolled with such unwavering dedication now seemed menacing, filled with shadows and whispers. Her once sharp instincts dulled, replaced by a gnawing anxiety. But even in the darkest depths of despair, a flicker of hope remained. One evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, staring at the badge that lay heavy in her hand, a thought pierced through the fog of despair. She had allowed the captain to steal her voice, her spirit, her career, but she would not let him steal her soul. She would not let him break her. A surge of determination coursed through her. She would fight back. She would expose him for the monster he was. She would reclaim her life, her dignity, her voice. She would not be silenced. She would not be ignored. She would be the storm. And in that moment of quiet resolve, a plan began to form in her mind. A plan for revenge. A plan to expose the truth and bring Captain Smith to justice. The fight would be long, arduous, and fraught with danger. But she was no longer afraid. She had nothing left to lose. She would become the hunter, and he, the prey. The desire for revenge, a potent seed, took root in Officer Johnson's heart. It blossomed slowly, fueled by her pain, her anger, her unwavering sense of justice. She had been a cop long enough to know that the system often failed those it was meant to protect. She wouldn't be another statistic, another forgotten victim. She would fight back, but not with her badge, not yet. This fight would be waged in the shadows, with cunning and with stealth. Her weapon? The truth. She spent hours poring over case files looking for any connection between Captain Smith and his illicit activities. Late nights bled into early mornings as she meticulously documented every instance of his misconduct, every inappropriate comment, every veiled threat. Her apartment became her war room, her determination a flickering flame in the darkness. She knew the risks. Discovery would mean ruin, but the fear that had once paralyzed her now fueled her purpose. She would have her day in court, even if it was a court of her own making. Officer Johnson knew she needed leverage, something concrete to use against Captain Smith. A rumor, whispered in the break room, caught her attention. The captain, it was said, had a weakness for gambling, a vice that had landed him in hot water before. This, she realized, was her opportunity. She began to frequent the seedy backrooms where the captain was known to place his bets, her heart pounding with each roll of the dice, each turn of a card. She watched him, studied his habits, her police instincts kicking in. She learned the names of his bookies, the locations of his secret accounts. It was a dangerous game she was playing, but the stakes had never been higher. One night, she caught him, his face flushed with a mixture of excitement and desperation, exchanging a large sum of money with a known criminal. It was the evidence she needed, proof that he was unfit to wear the badge. As Officer Johnson gathered her evidence, Captain Smith grew increasingly paranoid. He sensed the shift in power, the ground beneath his feet becoming unstable. He saw her shadow lurking in every corner, heard her name whispered in the wind. He became reckless, his actions more brazen, his grip on reality loosening. He started making mistakes, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs that led directly back to his crimes. He hired private investigators to follow her, to dig up dirt on her past. He spread vicious rumors, hoping to discredit her before she could strike. But his efforts only served to strengthen her resolve. She would not be broken, she would not be silenced. He had become the hunted, and she, the hunter. The tables had turned, and Officer Johnson was ready to collect her due. The net was closing in on Captain Smith. Officer Johnson, armed with her evidence, confronted her superiors, presenting them with an ultimatum: take action against the captain, or she would go public with everything. The department, faced with irrefutable proof of their captain's corruption, had no choice but to act. An internal investigation was launched, and the walls began to close in on the once untouchable captain. The rumors of his downfall spread through the precinct like wildfire. Whispers turned into accusations, suspicion into outrage. The very officers who had once turned a blind eye to his behavior now scrambled to distance themselves, their loyalty shifting with the changing tides. Captain Smith, stripped of his power, his reputation in tatters, was left to face the consequences of his actions. He had underestimated Officer Johnson, her resilience, her unwavering commitment to justice. And in his arrogance he had sown the seeds of his own destruction. The walls of Captain Smith's office seemed to close in, the air thick with tension. His face, once a mask of authority, now contorted in a grimace of fear and desperation. The evidence, meticulously gathered, lay scattered on his desk, a testament to his downfall. Officer Johnson stood before him, her gaze unwavering, her voice steady. Gone was the timid rookie, the victim cowering in the face of his power. In her place stood a woman of steel, forged in the fires of betrayal and injustice. She revealed her hand, each card a blow to his carefully constructed facade, the gambling debts, the shady connections, the abuse of power, all laid bare, undeniable. But it was her final revelation that shattered his composure completely. "I know about the HIV, Captain," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I know about your recklessness, your disregard for the very people you swore to protect." The color drained from his face, his eyes wide with panic. Captain Smith stumbled back, his hand instinctively reaching for the glass of water on his desk. His world, built on a foundation of lies and deceit, was crumbling around him. How could she know? How could she have found out? He stammered, trying to deny the allegations, but the words died in his throat. The truth, like a noose, tightened its grip. His carefully crafted persona, the image he had cultivated for years, lay shattered at his feet. "You have no right," he sputtered, his voice a mixture of anger and desperation. "This is slander, defamation, I'll have your badge for this." But his threats rang hollow, devoid of their usual power. Officer Johnson met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "You had your chance, Captain," she said, her voice low and steady. You had countless opportunities to do the right thing, to redeem yourself, but you chose power, you chose control, you chose yourself. The power dynamics in the room had shifted. The predator had become the prey, the hunter the hunted. Captain Smith, once a figure of authority and intimidation, now seemed small, pathetic even. The weight of his actions, the consequences of his choices, finally crashing down upon him. He sank into his chair, his shoulders slumped, his face pale and drawn. Defeat, like a bitter pill, settled in his gut. He knew it was over. His career, his reputation, his carefully constructed life, all reduced to rubble. He looked up at Officer Johnson, his eyes pleading for mercy, for understanding, but there was none to be found. Her heart, once filled with compassion, had hardened into a stone of cold, hard justice. "You took everything from me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "My career, my reputation, my sense of safety. You tried to break me, to silence me. But I'm still standing, Captain, and I'm not afraid of you anymore." News of Captain Smith's downfall spread through the precinct like wildfire. The whispers, the rumors, the hushed conversations, all confirmed, all validated. The system, so often criticized for protecting its own, had finally delivered justice. An internal investigation, swift and thorough, uncovered years of misconduct and abuse of power. Captain Smith, stripped of his rank and his badge, faced a litany of charges, his future uncertain, his legacy tarnished. For Officer Johnson, it was a bittersweet victory. The scars of his betrayal ran deep, a constant reminder of the darkness she had faced. But there was also a sense of closure, of vindication. She had stood up for herself, for what was right, and in doing so, she had found her voice, her strength. The system, flawed as it was, had ultimately worked. Justice, though slow and arduous, had prevailed. And in the ashes of Captain Smith's downfall, Officer Johnson found the strength to rebuild, to reclaim her life, her career, her dignity. The air in the precinct felt lighter, cleansed by the storm that had swept through its corridors. The shadow of Captain Smith's reign had lifted, replaced by a cautious optimism, a sense of renewal. The officers, once cowed by his presence, now held their heads a little higher, their voices a little stronger. Officer Johnson, once ostracized, now found herself surrounded by colleagues eager to offer their support. The whispers that had once followed her, filled with doubt, now carried a different tone, one of respect. She had become a symbol of courage, a reminder that one person can make a difference. Her story, whispered from locker to locker, served as a beacon of hope. Her ordeal had tested her faith, but revealed her inner strength. She emerged from the darkness, unbroken, ready to face the future with purpose. The road to justice had been long and arduous, paved with sacrifices and scars. Officer Johnson bore the weight of her experience, the emotional toll etched on her face. Memories of Captain Smith's abuse haunted her dreams, his words echoing in the silence. The fear lingered in the shadows, a constant companion. The isolation and betrayal had taken their toll. Her relationships had suffered, her trust shaken. The burden of her ordeal created a distance between her and those she loved. But she found strength in knowing she had done the right thing. The scars she carried were a testament to her resilience. Officer Johnson's actions had sent shockwaves through the department, far beyond the walls of the precinct. Her courage had inspired others to come forward, to break the silence that had protected abusers like Captain Smith for far too long. The department, forced to confront its own failings, implemented new policies and procedures designed to prevent harassment and discrimination, to create a safer, more equitable workplace for all officers. The culture of silence, once so pervasive, began to crumble, replaced by a renewed emphasis on accountability and transparency. Officers were encouraged to report misconduct, assured that their concerns would be taken seriously, that they would be supported, not silenced. The impact of Officer Johnson's bravery extended far beyond the walls of the department, serving as a catalyst for change in other institutions, in society as a whole. Her story became a rallying cry for victims of abuse, a reminder that they were not alone, that their voices mattered, that justice, though elusive, was worth fighting for. Officer Johnson's journey was far from over. The scars she carried, both visible and invisible, would forever be a part of her story. But she refused to let them define her. She threw herself into her work, her dedication unwavering. She mentored younger officers, sharing her story. her unwavering belief in truth and courage. She became a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience and strength. Her legacy would be one of triumph, the enduring power of the human spirit. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and this other story that may be appearing on the screen will most likely move you as well. Have a nice day, and see you in the next video.